I never thought I'd find myself in this position. 7 years of my life were wrapped around a man I thought would one day be my husband. 7 years of birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays spent imagining the life we'd build together. And yet, not once did he ever ask me to marry him. Every time I brought it up, there was always an excuse. "Now's not the right time," he'd say. "Work is crazy," or "let's save a bit more money first." Eventually, even the ultimatums I gave him fell on deaf ears. Deep down, I should have known that something was wrong, but I loved him too much to see it. It wasn't until I introduced him to my best friend, Sophia, that the nagging feeling in my gut started to grow. The day they met, we were all at a small gathering I'd organized. I remember watching them talk for the first time. There was something in the way they laughed, a spark that I couldn't explain. At first, I dismissed it. Sophia was like a sister to me. She'd never do anything to hurt me. But as time went on, I couldn't ignore how their chemistry seemed to linger in the air whenever they were near each other. Years passed, and I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. But then came the night I finally learned the truth. A friend of mine, someone who had no reason to lie, told me she'd seen my boyfriend and Sophia together at a restaurant. It was an intimate place, one of those candle-lit spots meant for couples. When I confronted him about it, he swore up and down that he'd been at a work event that evening. I wanted to believe him, but his eyes gave him away. That's when it all clicked. The late-night work meetings, the way he'd pull away whenever I mentioned Sophia's name, the excuses. He was cheating on me with my best friend. The betrayal burned deep, but what hurt more was their audacity. They didn't even bother to hide it well. I felt like a fool for ignoring all the signs, but instead of breaking down, I decided I wasn't going to let them get away with it. If they wanted to ruin my life, I'd make sure they paid for it. That's when I started planning my revenge. Sophia had recently gotten engaged to a man named James. I'd met him a few times, and he seemed like a genuinely kind and caring person. Too good for her, really. It wasn't hard to see that he adored Sophia, but I wondered how he'd feel if he knew about her affair with my boyfriend. That's when an idea began to form. It wasn't just about exposing her. It was about taking something she valued as much as she'd taken from me. I'll admit, at first, my plan felt outrageous. Could I really do this? Could I seduce James and destroy their relationship? But the more I thought about it, the more determined I became. I'd spent years being the good, loyal girlfriend, and where had it gotten me? It was time to take what I wanted. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One evening, I showed up at Sophia's apartment unannounced, pretending to be distraught. I told James I'd just found out my boyfriend was cheating on me. My voice cracked as I shared the news, and tears streamed down my face. Of course, I didn't mention who he was cheating with. James, ever the gentleman, invited me inside. Sophia wasn't home. She was out at some event, so it was just the two of us. James offered me a drink, and we sat on the couch as I poured out my heartbreak. He was kind and attentive, exactly the way I'd imagined he would be. He listened intently, his brows furrowed in concern, and offered words of comfort that felt genuine and warm. At one point, I let my hand brush against his arm, testing the waters. He didn't pull away. Instead, he placed his hand over mine, his touch firm yet soothing. I leaned in closer, under the pretense of needing comfort, and before I knew it, the air between us shifted. What happened next still makes my pulse race when I think about it. It started with a kiss, hesitant at first, but then hungry, passionate. His lips were soft, yet demanding, igniting a fire inside me that I hadn't felt in years. It was as if all the anger and hurt I'd been bottling up poured into that moment. James didn't resist. In fact, he matched my intensity, pulling me closer as if he'd been waiting for this as much as I had. His hands, strong and steady, found their way to my waist, pulling me onto his lap as our kisses deepened. I could feel the tension in his body, the conflict warring within him, but he didn't stop. Instead, he held me tighter, his breath hot against my neck as he whispered my name. I'd never felt so desired, so alive. Every touch, every movement was electric, sending shivers down my spine. The way he caressed my face, ran his fingers through my hair. It was like he was memorizing every part of me. We spent what felt like hours lost in each other, exploring the depths of our emotions and desires. There was an intimacy between us that I hadn't anticipated, a connection that went beyond just physical attraction. I could see it in the way he looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of passion and vulnerability. For the first time in years, I felt seen, valued, and wanted. Afterwards, as we lay tangled together on the couch, a heavy silence settled over us. The reality of what we'd done began to sink in, and I could see the guilt flicker across James's face. "This shouldn't have happened," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I know," I replied, my own guilt gnawing at me. But even as I said the words, I couldn't bring myself to regret what had happened. For the first time in years, I felt alive, and I wasn't ready to let that feeling go. In the days that followed, guilt started to creep in. Not guilt for Sophia. She'd betrayed me first, but guilt for James. He didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about him. His touch, his voice, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Part of me wanted to tell him the truth, to come clean about everything. But I knew that if I did, I'd lose him forever. And as much as I hated to admit it, I didn't want to lose him. Now I'm stuck in this impossible situation. James and Sophia are still engaged, but things between us have shifted. I can feel it every time we're in the same room. He's hesitant around her now, distant in a way he wasn't before. I know I've planted a seed of doubt in his mind, and I can't help but wonder if it'll grow into something that ends their relationship. But what if it doesn't? What if he stays with her, and I'm left with nothing? Or worse, what if I tell him how I feel, and he hates me for what I've done? The irony isn't lost on me. I set out to ruin Sophia's happiness, and now I'm the one who's tangled up in feelings I can't control. So now I'm asking you, the audience, what should I do? Should I confess everything to James and risk losing him? Or should I walk away and let him marry Sophia, knowing I'll never be able to forget what we shared? I need your advice. If you're still listening, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your support means so much to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Let me know, and don't forget to stay tuned for more stories like this one.